The federal government says it wants to make it easier and faster to review and investigate potential false convictions. The new legislation tabled is named for David and Joyce Milgaard, longtime advocates for people seeking exonerations. David Milgaard spent 23 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. His sister spoke earlier today.
It's a glorious day, hallelujah. She fought so long and so hard, along with David, for this day. It's an honor to be here and to be able to at least represent them since they can't be here. 2 generations have gone already. Let's stop it now in its tracks and please, please keep pushing forward for the people that are still there and still need your help.
The legislation would create an independent commission to review and investigate criminal cases and decide which ones should be sent back into the system. Minister of Justice David Lametti introduced this legislation earlier today, and he's here in studio with me now. Minister, thanks for coming in.
Pleasure being here.
We've seen some of these wrongful conviction cases, the David Milgaard case being an example, 23 years. He was wrongfully imprisoned. How does this new commission make this process more efficient?
Well, it's meant to, first of all, move more quickly. Notwithstanding best efforts in the part of the criminal cases review group in the Justice Department that works on this, it still takes a long time, and it takes too long, and requires, I think it's fair to say, too many resources. And even though you're getting pro bono help in many cases, we're trying to make it move more quickly by increasing the number of people who work on it, as well as the manner in which they work. They're going to work much more proactively and help people who apply much more actively. It's a model that is being used in other jurisdictions, and we think it'll work well here. That should reduce the time, should also reduce the efficiency. We've also, importantly, lowered the standard. This is an important thing for lawyers, but the old standard, the standard I currently work under as Minister of Justice, is that a miscarriage of justice was likely to have occurred. It will now be a miscarriage of justice may have occurred, and it is in the best interests of justice to move forward. So
explain that in layman's terms, because I know that that means very specific things, like this balance of probability versus in the legal. So what is the difference there for practically?
Well, now you need to show that there was possibly a miscarriage of justice, and remember the typical case here. It is often the case, this is well after a trial, well after a person has appealed. We're not trying to supplant the appeal system. It works with the appeal system. Well after the person's last appeal, a new piece of evidence comes out, DNA evidence or some other witness, some other piece of evidence, and there isn't any way to review it. So this gives an easier outcome or an easier standard to meet in order to have that inquiry start. Did a miscarriage of justice possibly occur, as opposed to did it likely occur? So there's a higher probability in the current standard. And then the commission will hopefully take on these cases, help people where they need help, do more outreach to let people know that the commission exists and that there's access that is available through this commission, and then hopefully move more quickly.
So in terms of the decision-making authority, though, like right now, a decision to order a new trial or these sorts of things would fall to you, correct, as Minister of Justice? But are you delegating entirely that decision-making power to this commission now?
Entirely.
So what if you disagree with them? What if there is a conflict there? Or like this never comes to your desk now after this, it goes to the commission?
That's correct. That's something that every single report that has been done after wrongful commission has recommended. In my case, I clerked for Justice Peter Corey, and he did the report in Thomas Sofino. They all recommend an independent commission, independent of the Minister of Justice and the Department of Justice, and it is important for people. James Lockyer underlined that this morning. For people who have been wrongfully convicted, or others who perhaps distrust the system, have had a bad experience with the system, come from a racialized community, an Indigenous person, they will feel, we hope, more confident going to an independent body to have their case reviewed than something that would come through the Justice Department. So it's important symbolically.
It's a neutral arbiter rather than the institution maybe that played a role.
That's correct.
In their view. Right. So,
and just to close the circle, they will have all the powers that I had under the current law. So they will be able to direct a new trial, so direct it to a court, a superior court for a new trial, or direct it straight to a court of appeal to hear a new appeal.
There was something else you said today that jumped out at me, because I've covered some wrongful convictions back home in Newfoundland and Labrador. Randy Drukin, Ronald Dalton, Greg Parsons are the three that come to mind, but again, all white men. And you mentioned today that a lot of these wrongful convictions we find are white men, and the prison population, that is not representative of the population. So how do you ensure that this process will be more accessible to non-white people who may have been wronged by the justice system?
Well, we're hoping that, the creation of the commission will again encourage people who might otherwise distrust the system, again, racialized Canadians, Indigenous peoples. But also, we're hoping the commission will do outreach and education. So we're hoping that they will more proactively move into the community and say, this service exists for the reevaluation of old cases. So we hope that in and of itself will create some momentum, and that is what has happened in other jurisdictions, the UK, Scotland, New Zealand, Australia. In each of those cases, there were more applications that were brought forth, particularly of lesser crimes, so not just the sort of homicide crimes that we've seen in our process. This
is resource intensive, right? The justice system is under stress as it is, and re-examining old cases and fighting for reopening of convictions takes money, takes time, takes lawyers. I mean, how do you ensure this commission has the firepower it needs to deliver on this mandate?
Well, I'll do my best to get those resources for the commission. In the long term, though, it should represent a savings. I mean, when you think that it costs well over $100,000 a year to incarcerate an adult male, and you have a number of people wrongfully convicted. Think of David Milgard, 23 years. There is a cost to society already that we're paying through wrongful convictions, in addition to the reputational cost to the justice system, in addition to the economic cost of people being incarcerated and the economic impact on their families, and settlements that we have to pay at the end of the day. So we think that this will actually be cost efficient over the long term. Can't prove that yet, but we do think we'll be in a better place if we do this.
I want to pivot, if I can, while I have you here. I know you're familiar with the report my colleague Ashley Burke did this week about 3 businessmen in this country who were accused by the FBI in the United States of having ties to the Iranian regime, and they were accused of trying to get around U.S. sanctions against Iran. I know you can't speak about extradition requests because it ultimately comes to you, and you were asked that question the other day, but right. I wonder how you view this, that people who are wanted in the United States for violating sanctions there are able to operate freely in Canada. I know they haven't been charged with anything here, but the assurances your government gave that this wouldn't be a safe haven for supporters of the Iranian regime, how do you square these two circumstances?
Well, first of all, on the one hand, we have taken very important concrete steps through the Immigration Act for supporters of the Iranian regime. Very real consequences, and we'll continue to look at other measures in that regard. Extradition requires the same or a similar law in both countries.
Dual criminality.
That's correct. And so the principle of dual criminality is an important one to extradition cases. And again, we'll continue to work with the United States. We have the greatest number of extradition cases in Canada go to the United States. I'm not certain whether that's true in the reverse direction, but certainly we work with American authorities. And we look at their criminal laws, they look at ours, and if there is something that we need to improve with respect to Canadian domestic law, we will certainly take that seriously.
I guess optically the criticism is a tough talk against what's happening in Iran, especially since the recent uprisings, and going back to last September, and yet we have this situation. I know these are older American sanctions that are at play here, but the critics would say, and people in the Iranian Canadian community would say, that Canada is functioning as a safe haven in these cases.
Well, as I said, we have enacted very tough, substantive measures in particularly using the Immigration Act. I know the ministers of public safety, the immigration ministers, and all the rest of the ministers around the cabinet table are working hard in that regard. And we'll hopefully be able, where we can, to enforce those sanctions, and we'll also look at other possibilities as we move forward.
Okay, one last question for you. Commissioner Rouleau is going to come out with his report tomorrow. What's at stake for your government in his finding?
Well, I think we always knew there would be a report, and we're looking to see what he says in terms of how we might improve the law. We'll see the report when we get it. We always knew it was coming. And we participated actively when called upon in order for Justice Rouleau to do his work. And again, it's a 30-year-old law, and hopefully we'll get some good guidance moving forward.
Politically, though, how important is it for you, for the government, to clear the bar that is being asked to see if you met it in what Commissioner Rouleau has been doing?
Well, again, I'm not going to speculate on what's in his report tomorrow. We feel we did the right thing. We feel that we took actions that needed to be taken, and we'll stand by that.
Okay. David Lametti, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.